So I'm calling my message this morning, What Part of the Body Are We? And this is sort of another vision campaign sermon, but I promise we will also get to kind of the individual aspect of it as well. If you're a bottom line person, the bottom line of this morning will be, we are each created as children of God and have our own gifts that we bring to the table because of who we are. So we should not try to be other than who God created us to be. So you may have noticed, if you have been here for a worship service that I have planned, that my style is very different than a worship service that Lance has planned. If you pay attention, you'll notice that Lance's services tend to be less formal, what you might call less liturgical, because of Lance's history with the disciples of Christ. You might notice that my services tend to be more liturgical, that there tends to be more of the words outside of the message because of my history initially with the Catholic Church and then the Methodist Church and then moving into the United Church of Christ. And even in the Methodist Church and the United Church of Christ, the churches that I have gone to have tended to be more formal churches. So I say more when I'm doing communion. I have longer prayers. It's just a different style. You'll also notice that the timing of the service tends to work out the same because Lance speaks longer than I speak, but I make up the time in the other words that are said. I don't say this because I think there's any judgment on Lance's services being better or worse than mine are. I'm sure some of you look and you see, oh, Lance's planned the service today, so Lance is going to talk a lot longer. And some of you say, oh, Rick has planned the service today, so Rick is going to talk less. And I'm sure some of you like that and some of you don't, and all of that. But as worship services, neither is better or worse. They're just different styles. Now, most of you are not planning worship services, so you might sort of be wondering, well, that's great, but what does that have to do with the visioning? A couple things. I am going to take a moment here for a sidebar. I've been looking at some of the results from the visioning process so far, especially the retreat notes. And I think that we are putting the cart before the horse a little bit when it comes to what we're talking about. I noticed that there were some kind of logistical elements that were being addressed in the retreat notes. So there were questions about how do we get funding for advertisements? How much money is in our bank accounts? How do we increase the number of people coming to service? How do we improve our online presence? Michelle, help me out. I know you looked at them too. What are some of the other logistics that were in there? We want to do this program, or we want to do that program. We want a children's sermon, or we don't want a children's moment, or we want more volunteer opportunities, or we want to do this volunteer opportunity. And again, I don't say this to say that I think those are bad thoughts to have. But those come after you've done the vision work of who are we. You need to know who you are before you can figure out what logistics you need to make who you are happen. So I want you to imagine with me, we're now kind of back into the main thrust of what I have to say this morning. Imagine with me, you're having a party. We're going to do this twice. So our first party, you are a Lance. You are somebody who's very informal. You're going to have people come over anytime from, maybe 2:30 to 8:30 on Sunday afternoon, watch the football game, hang out in the living room, sit on the couch, make your plate from the potluck spread out on the counter. Talk to this family member, that friend, this person who showed up who we didn't actually think was showing up, but we're having a party and now they're here, so they're welcome. You are the grandmother sitting in the comfy lazy boy in the corner with half gloves covering your arthritic fingers as you're sitting and knitting, with the children coming over and handing you your little cupcake and then your little side salad and then your little this and your little that. Or you're the non-binary uncle sitting out on the porch in the rocking chair who all of the kids are running around and waiting to hear the story from your last trip, wherever your last trip was. Where you're the little girl who has so much energy that can't be contained and is running from the living room out to the car, out to the backyard, out to the car to help bring in whatever the next tray of food is that's coming. So that's one party. Now imagine with me another type of party. Imagine a dinner party. Imagine that you're somebody who's maybe a little bit more like my worship style, where you have sent out invitations, I don't actually know, 4 or 6 weeks in advance and said, please RSVP if you'll be coming here, and you set up your round table, and you have name settings, and you have the silverware laid out, and you have your appetizer, and you have your main course, and you have your desserts, and you have that dish and this one, and little portions, and your pre-dinner drink, and your after-dinner drink, and your aperitif, and your all of the French words. And you're sitting there in candlelight, and everybody comes at 6:30 because 6:30 was the time on the invitation, and you mingle, and then you sit down to dinner at, I guess technically you should have arrived slightly later because dinner is 8, but you get the picture. You have a wonderful time with your 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 guests, and it's a lovely evening. Maybe in this scenario, you're the gender diverse sibling who cooked the steak perfectly in the oven, or your grandfather sitting just outside the door because you have to have your evening pipe, otherwise you're going to get cranky, and nobody wants that at the dinner party. Or maybe you're the little 3-year-old boy who, again, is running all over the place and has carried in the coats and taken them up to the coat closet so that everybody's coats are out of the way. And you're not really at the dinner party because it's past your bedtime and you will be put down before the dinner party. Hopefully, both of these are wonderful parties that most of us would be happy to be at, understanding that, again, we all have our own preferences, we have our own ideas of what's fun and what's not fun, but both very welcoming, very meaningful, very engaging parties. No moral judgment on you like this party better than that one. No moral judgment on you have this type of party and not that one. No moral judgment on any of that. It's just different gifts and different connections for different people. So now you might be wondering, okay, you said you were going to talk about the visioning process. What does this have to do with visioning? Well, again, I said I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with the logistics. If you just say we're having a party, let's go out and buy food, let's do invitations, let's decorate, what else do you have to do for a party? Set out the drinks. Well, are you setting all of that up like you're having the informal party? Or are you setting all of that up like you're having the formal party? You need to know who you are and what type of party you are having before you can get to what are we doing to make the party happen. So that's, I think, where we're at as a congregation. What type of church are we? What type of community are we? What makes us who we are? And again, there's way more than two types of churches, communities, congregations. There's a whole host of them. Are we about Sunday morning worship and fellowship time and adult forum? Are we about, Lance, help me out, the food? Who does the food? AHTN, and providing food and connecting with the Ivans House and
ERA.
ERA, thank you. That was the other one I was trying. Thank you, Bill. Or are we about very kind of deep and intentional Bible study? And I keep saying or, but some of these are not mutually exclusive. You just have to identify which of these are things that matter to us, which of these help us be who we are, which of these help us to make the impact on the world that we want to have. The other thing that I would highlight here is that when you talk about the body, and when you talk about this particular passage, there can be some risk of kind of falling into ableism, of saying, if my body doesn't function in this way, it's a bad body. Or if you think about a party, if you say, I can't run around and clean the house because I'm that grandmother with the half gloves covering my arthritic knuckles, then I'm not contributing to the party. But I think if you look at the passage closely, and if you think about even those parties as examples, you'll notice that it's not about the ability, it's about the contribution. It's about the presence, more so even than the contribution. So that grandmother sitting in the corner on the lazy boy with the half gloves covering arthritic knuckles is a very meaningful part of that party. She has stories to tell. She's knitting whatever, scarves and gloves and socks for the family that she loves so deeply. She doesn't have to carry in the 24-pack of sodas. The 7-year-old girl running from car to car doesn't have to carry in the 24-pack of sodas either. That can be somebody who's at a point in stage in life and with their body who can do that. And that person might not know how to knit the gloves, or might not know how to welcome somebody with the open heart of a 7-year-old child who is excited like they haven't seen whoever in 24 years, even though they saw them 2 days ago. But it's that sense of excitement. And by that, I mean, we are who we are. Yes, there are some of us who are older and who are tired physically and maybe can't be out on the street protesting the way that we once were and the way we might wish we could be. Those of us have experience being out on the street protesting and can share what do you do to do that well with people who could be out on the street protesting. There are people who are more comfortable being upfront and speaking, and people who could not imagine being upfront and speaking. Just think about how many of you hate to even hold the microphone in front of your face while you're saying your prayers. But you are part of what makes this church, this congregation, this community what it is. So now the more personal bit of it is, who are you? Because you are part of what makes this church, this congregation, this community what it is. Who are you? Who did God create you to be? You are a beloved child of God, as you are. Whether you are tired and don't have the energy, whether you are running around with all of the energy, whether you are musically inclined or can't carry a note, whether you like the informal football parties or you like the formal dinner parties. What makes you who you are? And I'll say, I think that as we're doing this visioning process, even though there are things that I think we're getting the cart ahead of the horse for, I do think that we're finding who we are. I think we're re-energized. I mean, I can't imagine, when did I start coming? 2 or 3 years ago, that 12 people would have gone on a Friday night to a Shabbat service at Kolomet. 12 people from this congregation went together because that mattered. I think if that had happened 2 years ago, a lot of people would have said, that sounds like a great thing to do, but I'm too tired to go and do that. Dale had some other great examples of things that have been happening when we talked as a clergy group on Monday, and I'm trying to remember what some of them are. I think there's new energy amongst some of the official leaders of the congregation to focus on how do we make the best use of the building and ensure that the building is safe and does what it needs to do so that we can be a community of faith. We have, again, the adult forum. I'm a little biased since I'm leading it now, but there are, Michelle, how many regulars? 7, 8 people who show up every Sunday morning to do deep and hard and reflective and meaningful work about what it means to be an anti-racist in the world today. Like, there's energy and meaning here. We just need to identify how to bring it together and who we are and who you are as part of that. So what part of the body are you? What part of the body are we? And how do we bring God's love and peace into the world that desperately needs it? Amen.